and bonjour tout le monde.
Welcome and good morning to everyone.
And meeting number 35 of the House of Commons of the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights. And pursuant to order of reference on April 2nd, 2026, the committee will continue and complete, I hope, its study on Bill C-238, an act to amend the Criminal Code restitution orders. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Pursuant to the standing orders, members that are attending in person, in the room, and remotely using the Zoom application. I think that everybody's gone through their Zoom sound checks effectively, so we should be good on that. I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses and members. Firstly, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you're not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can see the selection and check which interpretation you would like. You have the option of the floor, French, and English. For those in the room, you can use your earpiece and select on your devices the desired channel for yourself. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in Zoom, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best as we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. So appearing today with us for the first hour, we have Angels of Hope Against Human Trafficking, Christina Scarpellini, who's a founder, who's here by video conference, and we have the Go Give Project, Evie Ali, who's the executive director. We welcome you both. We'll start with Christina, please, for 5 minutes for your opening remarks. Please go ahead.
Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Christina Scarpellini, and I am the founder and executive director of Angels of Hope Against Human Trafficking, a registered Canadian charity that provides long-term, trauma-informed support to survivors of human trafficking and sexual exploitation, as well as individuals who are at risk of exploitation. Since founding Angels of Hope in 2015, I have had the privilege of walking alongside survivors as they rebuild their lives after experiencing some of the most devastating forms of abuse imaginable. Through this work, I have witnessed both the profound harm caused by human trafficking and the remarkable resilience of survivors who refuse to let their exploitation define them. Angels of Hope serves survivors of all ages, genders, and backgrounds across Ontario. We provide free bilingual services in a safe, supportive, and trauma-informed environment. Our approach is survivor-centered and rooted in harm reduction, recognizing that healing is not a linear process and that recovery takes time, trust, and long-term support. To date, Angels of Hope has provided long-term support services to more than 400 survivors and their families. Every survivor's story is different, but there is one common theme. The impact of human trafficking does not end when the exploitation ends. The trauma can last for years. Survivors often require ongoing mental health support, addiction treatment, housing assistance, education, employment support, and community reintegration. The funding may end, but the trauma does not. Our support for Bill 238 is rooted in what we see every day on the front lines. When a trafficker exploits a victim, the harm extends far beyond that individual. The effects are felt by families, communities, healthcare system, social services, law enforcement, and the organizations that step in to provide support and recovery services. For years, charity and frontline organizations like ours have worked tirelessly to address the consequences of human trafficking. We provide counseling, advocacy, case management, crisis support, and long-term care because survivors deserve every opportunity to heal and rebuild their lives. Yet, the reality is that the costs associated with recovery are significant, and too often those costs are borne by survivors, their families, community organizations, and taxpayers. Meanwhile, the individuals responsible for creating that harm are rarely required to contribute to repairing it in a meaningful way. Bill C-238 recognizes an important principle. Those who cause harm should bear greater responsibility for addressing its consequences. This legislation acknowledges the real and measurable impact that human trafficking has on victims and on the organizations that support them. It recognizes that recovery is not immediate, that services are essential, and the frontline organizations play a critical role in helping survivors move forward. From our perspective, Bill C-238 strengthens accountability. It sends a message that human trafficking is not only a crime against an individual victim, it is a crime that creates lasting and social economic costs that ripple through entire communities. Most importantly, this bill recognizes something survivors tell us repeatedly. Recovery requires support, and support requires resources. No legislation alone will end human trafficking. We need prevention, education, enforcement, survivor services, housing, mental health supports, and long-term investments in recovery. But Bill C-238 is an important step because it recognizes the reality faced by survivors and the organizations that serve them. As someone who has dedicated more than a decade to supporting survivors, I believe this legislation reflects both fairness and accountability. Survivors should not have to carry the burden of recovery alone. Families should not have to cover it alone. Communities should not have to carry it alone. And the organizations providing critical support should not be expected to shoulder that burden alone. On behalf of Angels of Hope Against Human Trafficking and the survivors we serve, I would like to thank the committee for its attention to this issue and for considering measures that strengthen accountability and support for those affected by human trafficking. Human trafficking thrives in silence, secrecy, and vulnerability. By supporting survivors, strengthening accountability, and investing in recovery, we can build a safer communities and create a future where fewer people become victims in the first place. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Scarpellini. We're moving on to Ms. Ali for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Evie Ali, and I am the co-founder and executive director of the Go Give Project in Greater Sudbury. The Go Give Project began as a small grassroots organization, and we have grown into a municipally funded charitable organization. Our work is rooted in emergency response framework and operates at the intersection of addiction, homelessness, poverty, mental health, and crisis response. Our staff provide outreach services, a drop-in center, overdose response, resource navigation, crisis intervention, and de-escalation. Our ongoing support to our community's most vulnerable individuals allows us to see firsthand the profound impacts of victimization. Through the work, we witness the profound impacts, such as violence, financial instability, and usually to those who are the least equipped to navigate complex systems. While our organization is not a legal service provider, we see every day the impacts that crime and victimization have on individuals. Many of the people that we support have experienced theft, assault, fraud, exploitation, intimate partner violence, and property damage. For those already living in poverty or instability, even the smallest financial loss can be devastating. Replacing identification, medications, cell phones, clothing, personal belongings, or securing emergency transportation pose significant barriers to recovery, housing stability, employment, and personal safety. Restitution orders can provide important pathways for recognizing financial harm caused by crime. However, in practice, many victims face challenges navigating the justice system and often struggle to access meaningful compensation or even understand the processes that are available to them. From a frontline perspective, any measure that improves the awareness of restitution, increases accessibility, and reduces barriers for victims are positive steps. Victims should not be expected to navigate complex processes, especially during times of trauma and uncertainty. As Parliament considers Bill C-238, I encourage members to not only consider the legal framework of restitution orders, but also the practical realities that victims are facing, particularly those who are marginalized, living in poverty, experiencing homelessness, or dealing with addiction and mental health challenges. The justice system works best when individuals who have suffered from harm feel heard and supported throughout the process. Financial restitution alone cannot undo trauma, but meaningful access to restitution can help restore dignity, stability, and a sense of justice. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ellie. And before we go into questions, I will remind members that it is important to be respectful, as this is a very sensitive topic that we are talking about today, and to really have respect for the victims and the survivors. We'll start with our first 6-minute round with Mr. Lawton. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and congratulations on your first meeting as chair from the outset of the meeting. Anyway, thank you to the witnesses for being here. I'll start with you, Ms. Ali. The first off, thank you for the work you do. I mean, we've all seen the problems that you identify in communities across the country, and people that have a heart and a desire to serve and try to address that is it's something that we have a great deal of gratitude for. I just wanted to get into a little bit more of the specifics on the work you do for people with addictions in particular. You have identified work on harm reduction supports. What is the harm reduction you're referring to that your agency participates in?
We practice harm reduction in a number of ways throughout the agency. Of course, we could look at the basics where we're looking at needle exchange programs via public health. That is a very small part of what we do. We also look at reducing harms through our outreach services by providing that de-escalation as well as crisis intervention. We work alongside the Greater Sudbury Police Services in order to provide protection for both agencies to ensure that individuals are accessing or being treated fairly and accessing everything that is available to them. We also have drop-in centers. We operate cooling and warming throughout the summer, winter. Essentially, all of our work is framed around reducing harms in addiction.
So you're distributing needles to IV drug users. Are you giving out like crack pipes, those sorts of materials as well?
That would be correct.
Okay. And is any of the work you do directed towards recovery, getting people off of drugs? And if so, could you please explain a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. So harm reduction would always be the first step. We can't just ship you off to treatment if we don't have a relationship with you. You don't want to hear that from us. So we really pride ourselves in the meaningful relationships that we have built. And just for a little bit of a brief backgrounder, we sent 7 people to treatment centers across Northern Ontario last month. And this month we're hoping to see an increase in those numbers.
And how many people would you serve on distributing drug paraphernalia in a month?
I don't have that data in front of me, but would be happy to submit a written response.
That would be very helpful. Thank you. And are you a participant of any safe supply programs?
So there currently aren't any official safe supply programs available.
Is your organization a supporter of safe supply?
We're not here to discuss drug policy.
Well, we are, unfortunately, because in the actual legislation, there's very little limitation on what types of organizations would receive restitution under this. And one of the discussions we'll be having when we get to clause by clause is about whether we need to fine-tune that. And I think just from a political perspective, and this is not your responsibility, but we have seen a great many problems with safe supply in provinces that have done it. So when we look at, which organization should be able to receive restitution, it is relevant. So I'm just curious what your organization's view is on safe supply.
What I can share with you is that every day we are supporting marginalized victims of crime in some way or another. Sometimes that can be a very simple support chat, and sometimes that escalates further. We have to, rehouse, relocate, replace lost, missing items. So the impacts are there, they're tangible, and they're in our communities and many communities, if not all.
Do you believe people facing drug addiction should be supplied with drugs?
I fail to see the relevance.
Well, it's highly relevant when we're talking about the way that drug policy is unfolding on streets and in organizations across the country, because we have these two distinct viewpoints. We have some organizations that are more inclined to say that recovery is the path forward that we need to be prioritizing. Then we have others that have been pushing what I think is actually amounted to enabling drug users by providing them access to the very substances that are causing the problems. We've also seen in communities with safe supply a significant increase in diversion, where the safe supply drugs are then sold to, in some cases, students, while the person who was given the safe supply drug then gets the money to buy the stronger drug they really want. So it's highly relevant if we're talking about creating a pipeline where an organization is going to be receiving funding when that organization might be participating in something that's making things worse. So if you don't want to answer, that's fine. I just want to stress why this is such a big issue here. And I'll just turn to you, Ms. Scarpellini here. Just on the human trafficking side of things, we had tried to, in a previous bill, really look at human trafficking and the absence of really strong penalties here. And I know that Paul Brandt, a country singer who's done a tremendous amount of work on this, has pointed out that, human trafficking is not an issue that we can pin on any particular community. It's literally everywhere. And I'm wondering if you could just, in the minute I have left here, speak to what that looks like in Northern Ontario.
So in Northern Ontario, specifically Greater Sudbury, we are considered a hub for human trafficking due to our geographical location.
Just what are some of the stories that have struck you about who this affects? Because one of the things I have learned about this issue is that there is this "it couldn't happen to me" dynamic where people feel like it's always some other demographic that's at risk when it really is anyone.
In my opinion, it doesn't discriminate against a certain class of people. Some people may become more vulnerable, but in all honesty, it could happen to anyone.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawton. Moving on to Madame Lapointe for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I want to start by thanking Christina and Evie for the many meetings that you've had with me and discussions that we've had that has really helped give shape and form to this bill. And I also want to thank you for appearing at committee today. Christina, you had talked about how survivors and families and communities shouldn't have to carry the burden of recovery alone. And that really speaks to the importance of the support services that are offered in not only Sudbury, but in communities all across Canada. Can you tell us about the importance of those services for victims of these crimes?
So I feel the importance of long-term support for victims of human trafficking is so that they don't end up back with their trafficker. If we have a survivor that isn't healed, chances are they could end up back with their trafficker. And our goal is to walk hand in hand with them on their healing journeys. So, if a survivor is using substances, we can get them to abstain from it and go into treatment. But it's very important that a survivor recovers from this so that they don't become a statistic, either back with their trafficker or dead.
Thank you. Evie, in your opening statement, you talked about the profound impacts of victimization. Can you expand on those impacts and what you see every day?
Absolutely. So, of course, the crimes that we support in vary from petty theft to things more significant, serious assaults, and so on and so forth. Support, as I mentioned, can range as well from a variety of things. Sometimes it's very simple, but sometimes it requires, all hands on deck to support an individual because we're looking at a multifaceted problem. When you have a victim coming forward that is from a marginalized population, they don't have somewhere safe to go. They don't have the resources behind them to continue to promote a healthier lifestyle or to get them out of where they were. And I say this coming from lived experience. I am 16 years sober. I used to be homeless and an addict in the very same community that we're serving. And it was only because I had privilege that I get to sit here and have this conversation with you today. It is our goal to bridge the gaps and barriers to provide that privilege to other people that come from other demographics that won't necessarily have access.
Thank you, Evie. In some of the discussions that we had, we talked about that this bill is not only about bringing accountability on the part of those committing these crimes, but it's also about visibility for the frontline responders who support these victims. And currently, the support organizations like yours, Evie, are largely not seen in our judicial system. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're dealing with victims that have been through the justice system, typically they will land up back at our agencies or similar agencies. Our agencies are all above capacity, we're underfunded, and we're all dealing with multiple simultaneous crises all at once. When a victim comes forward, we have to do our best to support them with the limitations that we are given, and those limitations are often financial. While there are often other supports available to victims, there are many hoops that they have to jump through to access them. And this is what we keep coming back to with this bill, is victims should not have to go through complex processes during those times in their life just to access meaningful supports.
Thank you. Christina, in your opening statement, you talked about how Bill C-238 recognizes an important principle that those who cause harm should bear greater responsibility for addressing its consequences. Can you share with us, or expand on that point and share with us some of the things that you've heard from victims of human trafficking that you support?
So I often hear from victims of human trafficking that they don't get justice, whether that be that they went through the justice system and their trafficker wasn't convicted, or even if their trafficker was convicted, they feel that the trafficker themselves should be contributing to their recovery since they're the ones that caused the trauma.
You also talk about how the impact of trafficking doesn't end when the exploitation ends. Can you tell us what is meant by that?
Well, the trauma that survivors endure while being exploited, the real recovery starts after they've exited the game, and that is a long and intense, complex process. Most survivors, we've had survivors that have been with us, working with us for the past 5 years, because healing is not a linear journey.
Thank you, Christina. And Evie, you talked about how raising awareness of restitution being a positive step. Can you expand on that?
Absolutely. So Bill C-238, really just acknowledges that frontline organizations are absorbing cost in relation to these crimes that are being committed.
And if you could give this committee advice in terms of from the people that you support every day, what would you want this committee? What is the most important message you would want these committee members to walk away with today?
I always want to repeat and enforce that nobody woke up one morning and decided to live this lifestyle. There is always a chain of events or a significant event that leads somebody to where they sit today, be it an encampment, a jail cell, a sidewalk, without a home. Nobody woke up and decided, today I want to try drugs and ruin my life. Today I want to risk my life and lose my family. Nobody woke up and chose that. There's always an underlying cause, an underlying circumstance. Sometimes it relates back to very early childhood, and sometimes it's something that happens, through our growth spectrum as we become adults. But I really cannot stress enough. We hear so much they don't want help or they just want drugs, and that's just not the reality. We're dealing with multiple systems that are designed on outdated policy that still stigmatize and create barriers for the individuals to access help, and then we want to sit here screaming that they don't want it. So I just, again, cannot stress enough, nobody woke up and chose this. Everybody has, something that's led them to where they are, and nobody is happy in this lifestyle despite, the misconstrued sort of stereotypes we may see surrounding that.
Thank you.
That's really important to me.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madame Lapointe. Moving on, Monsieur Fortin pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Fortin, for 6 minutes, please. Thank you, Chair. Madame Ali and Madame Scarpellini, thank you for being with us here this morning. Of course, we all recognize the importance of helping victims of criminal acts who are involved in often complex and costly judicial proceedings. And on this subject, I think we all should commend you for the work you do in your organizations, and I thank you for this very sincerely. That being said, on C-238, there are a few things I'd like to look at with you. Madame Ali, currently, do you receive subsidies? You're in which province? In Ontario. Do you receive subsidies from the government of Ontario and from the federal government?
We do not.
Vous financez vos activités comment?
How do you fund your activities?
Our activities are currently municipally funded and privately funded.
OK. dans votre... par rapport à ces...
When someone is convicted to a sentence currently, there are victims who can receive compensation. If the bill is passed, community organizations can receive this as well. Have you thought about how we can align the two different types of compensation?
Absolutely. So the victim should always remain the priority. But when we start really diving into things and looking at the number of victims that are actually accessing the restitutions available to them versus what is actually available, you'll notice that a very small number are either equipped to access or navigate the steps, or just aren't aware that those steps are even available to them. I think that it's always important to keep the victim on the front line, and this bill simply recognizes that the agencies are also absorbing costs. And again, not a legal agency, so I can't speak to the legal framework of this. I can only speak to what we experience.
Merci, Madame Ali. Madame Scarpellini, je vous poserai la même question.
I'd like to ask you the same question, Madame Scarpellini. How should we align victims' requests as opposed to community organizations?
Yeah.
Could you please repeat your question? The question was currently victims can receive compensation when someone is convicted, when the perpetrator is convicted, but with this bill it will be community organizations who can also receive restitution. How to align requests coming from both the victim and the community organizations?
Est-ce qu'il y a un ordre de priorité à respecter?
Is there some kind of order of priority that should be upheld?
Je comprends pas ton question.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question. So we'll move on to another question. In which province do you work?
Ontario.
Ontario. And do you receive subsidies from the provincial government in Ontario or from the Canadian federal government? Oh, from the federal government, but only for one-year projects. Do you know that currently there's what are known as victim surcharges when someone is convicted, and the proceeds of victim surcharges are used by the government to fund the activities of victim support organizations. What is your view on this? In your opinion, are these surcharges not high enough? We seem to be multiplying the sources of funds. What's your view on this? Could I answer in English? Of course you can.
Okay. Je m'excuse, il y a quelque chose de mal avec mon...
I'm sorry, but my headphones don't seem to be working. Chair, can we suspend to help the witness correct their headphone problem?
Can I please ask IT if there's any challenges, please? In the meantime, Monsieur Fortin, if you've got other questions for other witnesses, maybe we can come back to this question for this witness while we figure out the IT.
Oui, je vais continuer avec Madame Ali.
Yes, I'll continue with Madame Ali. Thank you, Chair. Madame Ali, on your end, I'm sorry, I'm coming down with a cold. Do you receive subsidies from the Victim Surcharges Program?
We do not.
OK. Et j'aborderai un autre sujet.
I'd like to take up another matter. For victims, for the people you help, am I right to say that the most important thing for them is to have hearings that take place on quickly and that end quickly?
I think that would be presumptuous for us to assume for everybody. I don't think that I have an appropriate answer. That's out of my scope.
Et bon, j'aurais posé la question à Madame Scarpellini.
I would have liked to ask the same question of Madame Scarpellini, but there seem to be technical problems. Those are the questions I wanted to ask. I'd like to ask some questions to Madame Scarpellini when her headset is fixed.
Perhaps Madame Scarpellini can answer the question in writing to the committee. Would that be something that you'd be comfortable with, Monsieur Fortin?
Ben, je pourrais être confortable avec ça. La seule problématique.
That could work. The only problem is that, Madam Chair, as you know, we're doing clause by clause in half an hour. I'm not sure what a written answer, what good that will do, which we'll receive another day or next week. It'll be too late.
Perhaps, Ms. Scarpellini, can you try to answer now? Maybe your sound is a little bit better.
I think so. I just tried to attach it again. Yes. Peux-tu répéter ton question, s'il vous plaît?
Could you please repeat your questions? Yes. Yes, I'll repeat my question. I was saying, so for victims, is it not more important to have hearings, a trial that takes place quickly and also that comes to a conclusion quickly rather than knowing how community organizations will be funded?
Absolutely. It is important that trial is done in a quick manner for the sake of survivors, but we also need quick funds to help those survivors as soon as they exit the situation.
Et vous recevez de l'argent présentement du programme de sur...
And do you currently receive funds from the Victim Surcharges Program?
No.
6 minutes. Avez-vous arrêté pendant qu'on...
Did you stop the clock due to technical problems?
Pas parce que je mesure...
I don't understand. I'm only at 6 minutes, 2 seconds. Okay, very well.
Thank you. I appreciate your understanding, Monsieur Fortin. You will have another round, of course. Moving on to our second round of 5 minutes, starting with Mr. Baber. Please go ahead.
Ms. Ali, thank you for your evidence and for your appearance today. I very much share your perspective with respect to addictions. Nobody chooses to wake up in the morning and suffer some of the consequences that our friends, neighbors, loved ones, constituents have been known to suffer from. And I thank you for your efforts. I'd like to talk about the practicality of the bill. And I appreciate your sentiment that it's important to bring awareness to restitution. And I agree with you. Restitution may be a component of sentencing that, while it will never make the victim or the organization whole, certainly helps, I think, everyone involved. I'd like to canvass, however, the feasibility of what is being studied by this committee. So I see that you've been founded in 2020, and may I ask, what percentage, roughly, of your budget is geared to administration?
Approximately 60%.
6-0?
60.
And do you have, within that budget, does that include your legal budget?
That is correct.
Does that include any litigation budget?
It does not.
Okay. So fair to say organizations such as yourselves are rarely involved in litigious matters. And so my understanding is you don't currently spend any money on any active litigation.
That's correct.
Okay. You understand that in the event that your organization is successful in obtaining portion of a sentence, in that a judge would sentence a criminal to provide restitution to your organization, then you would have to engage in enforcement proceedings trying to collect that money.
I do understand that.
Okay. Do you have you had any conversations or any considerations seeing if such an endeavor would in fact yield a financial benefit, or would it more likely result in a financial loss vis-a-vis legal costs?
We have not explored it that in depth at this time. What I can share is that that whole process is very similar to any process that we have to go through as a nonprofit or a charity to access funding, especially when it comes down to the federal and provincial funds. They want everything except the blood of my firstborn. So this really wouldn't be new news for us. We're used to having to fight for every penny. So as of right now, at this stage of the bill, we don't see that being a roadblock.
I appreciate your consideration. My view, respectfully, is that a litigious process, when you try and collect funds from a criminal, may yield different, not just results, but also different requirements and methods in order to pursue it. What this amounts to effectively is an order that would be registered with the court, and then you would try and seize assets or try to garnish wages to try and satisfy that judgment. If you would be so kind to tell me, what is the common profile? And I'm sure every situation is unique. But when you talk about folks that regretfully perpetuate crime against some of the victims that you serve, what are some of the common scenarios in which you encounter such individuals? Give me a scenario.
Typically, the most common situation that we encounter are our community is often victimized by other communities, so individuals coming from other communities. We are not looking at neighbor-on-neighbor crimes as often as we are looking at intercity crime. So it really is a ripple effect. And I think that is more impactful than when it's neighbor-on-neighbor crime, because those are typically your pettier crimes. You know, people can step forward and move forward from that. The things that we're seeing in our community are leaving lifelong lasting impacts. And then we talk about having individuals in these situations, and it keeps them where they're at.
So those folks that presumably come from other communities, do they often share an addiction component of their own?
So typically, from our experience as a frontline agency, when we look at Bill C-238, we're looking at the organized crime and the drug dealers that are coming in and profiting off of our marginalized community, not the marginalized community.
And do you anticipate that you would be able to satisfy a judgment against a drug dealer?
I don't believe that it would happen every time, but I believe that there is ample opportunity for those outcomes.
And you would be prepared?
Thank you very much, Mr. Baber. We are out of time for you. We're moving on to Ms. Begum for 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Very much, Chair. Good morning. I'll start with Evie, you yourself first, and then go to Christina. Thank you so much for being here. I remember last year when you were facing budget cuts and faced a lot of layoffs. If I'm not mistaken, you had to have less staff, less resources to do the same amount of work. And post-COVID, you've had a massive increase in the number of people that have required your services, and you've saved so many lives. If you wanted to just expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, so it's really been quite a journey throughout the last 6 years. Sorry, there were multiple points to your question, but let's talk about the saving lives piece. So for the month from January to April, we lost 42 individuals in our community as a result of the toxic drug poisonings. In that same window of time, we responded to 129 overdoses that were effectively reversed. We do work at a very limited capacity because, again, we are a nonprofit agency. And we did reduce our staff as of January 1st of this year due to some funding cuts. Sorry, could you repeat the question?
That's okay. So one of the things that I was just looking at, reports from last year show that 5,630 people died from accidental overdose, and that was a decline from the year before, but that's still too many. And you talked about 40 people, that you had to deal with, and I cannot imagine just being able to have an incident where you can save a life, this is something that you can prevent, and because of resource, scarcity, we lose a life. I wanted to touch on something that I think my colleagues kind of hinted towards, but one of the issues that we face is when something like this happens, most of the time, what happens when you don't have the resources? People end up in hospitals. And that actually costs us more, if I'm not mistaken, correct? And if, in your perspective, do you think Bill C-238 could strengthen your ability to support more people so that we can actually save more in the long run?
Absolutely. So when we're looking at how Bill C-238 is outlined, it's really, again, just acknowledging that we are absorbing costs related to these crimes that are taking place. As you mentioned, we are seeing overloaded emergency first responders across the board. It's not just in Northern Ontario. I'm pretty sure it's everywhere. And, we work very closely with our community partners to alleviate some of those strains. But again, funding is always the barrier. So this really, again, is just acknowledging the work that's already being done and the impact it already has, and it's just in a more legal framework.
Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you also sharing your story as well. I want to move to Christina with my remaining time and ask, first, thank you so much for being here this morning. You talked a lot about the system and how we cannot allow for the victims to fall into the same trap. Do you believe that the current justice system adequately recognizes the burden that you have, that is placed on organizations that provide the service, and to trafficking survivors?
I don't believe the whole justice system, but
I'm sorry, I've stopped your time. Can I get IT to please get in touch with, are you back? Can you hear us?
yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, please continue then.
Sorry, could you repeat that question? I totally got sidetracked.
I wanted to ask if you could speak a little bit about, do you think the justice system currently adequately recognizes the burden placed on organizations like yourselves that provide services to trafficking survivors?
Yeah, so like I said, I think for the majority, yes, they do, but there might be the odd person that doesn't. They do need, like I said, recovery only starts after they've exited the game.
You're back again. Oh.
Ms. Scarpellini, you keep freezing on our screen over here, so I'm not sure.
Sorry.
Maybe perhaps trying turning off your camera for connection. It is your connectivity that's the issue over here. And perhaps you can answer the question with your remaining time with your camera off.
Sorry, that's what I had to say in regards to that.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Begum, your time is up. All right, Monsieur Fortin, for 2.5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Ali, earlier, my Conservative colleague was asking you about the recovery process. I just want to understand that what's in the bill, when someone is charged with assault against a victim, not only does the Crown have to prove that there's been an offense, but they'll all add hearing time to look at the damages that for community agency and the link between these requested damages and the responsibility of the person charged. This operation will take some time. It will vary from case to case, from situation to situation, but it will nonetheless require some time. Aren't you afraid that defense attorneys will use this court time to say, well, we couldn't really have a hearing in reasonable timeline, and so the charges have to be dropped?
I suppose that is something that could be considered. Again, I am not a legal expert, so I really can't speak to that.
Mais je comprends que vous n'êtes pas une.
I understand that you're not a legal expert, you're not a lawyer, and I understand this, but in my humble opinion, and this is why you're here, you're an important actor when it comes to helping victims of criminal acts, and everyone here, no matter the party, wants to provide as much support as possible to victims. And so I don't have an answer to the question, and I'd like to hear what you have to say. What I'm wondering is, are we not unnecessarily complicating things for victims? Wouldn't it be better to provide them support by ensuring that the criminal or the accused has a quick trial, and that agencies are supported, for example, through victim surcharges? This would be better than just making the whole thing more complicated.
So I think a really important piece of Bill C-238 is that it allows judges to order restitution. So this is where we start looking at the risk to reward benefit. Maybe every case it's not ordered, especially for community agencies, especially if it doesn't make sense for the victim, because the victim has to always be at the forefront. But it does give judges the ability. So it's not, the bill is not saying every time somebody in relation to a drug or human trafficking crime that, you know, is from Christina or I's organization, the agencies will be ordered restitution. That's not what the bill is saying. It's just saying that it becomes a possibility. So then we can start looking at, again, the risk to benefit rewards. We can start looking at what is in the best interest for the victim. Are we now supporting that victim throughout the trial? And they're in need of, you know, all of these things. Perhaps they need clothes to attend court, and now they need a cell phone to speak with their lawyer, those types of things. Those are costs that we're going to absorb. So now the judge will have an opportunity, if he sees fit, to have those costs paid in restitution to the agency. It doesn't become mandatory.
Thank you.
C'est fini.
Merci, monsieur. I appreciate that. Moving on to our final 5-minute blocks each. Mr. Brock, you've got 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also want to take the opportunity, as my colleague Mr. Lawton did, to publicly congratulate you on your election as chair of this amazing committee, where generally, more often than not, we take a collaborative approach to deal with pressing, ongoing issues that are concerning to Canadians. And this certainly is an area, and I wanted to thank the two witnesses for your attendance today and your participation in this study. But, you know, we as parliamentarians, we can walk and chew gum at the same time, and we often do that very well as we navigate a myriad of policies and government bills, but most importantly, private member bills. This, in fact, being a private member's bill. So at this time, Madam Chair, I'd like to move my motion that I presented and filed on Thursday, June 4th, 2026. And I'm prepared to read it out and to speak to this this motion at this time. That the committee consider Bill S-233, an act to amend the criminal code, assault against persons who provide health services and first responders on or before Monday, June 15, 2026, provided that the House and Senate sponsors of the bill be invited to testify, along with any other witnesses deemed relevant by committee members, and that following the testimony, the committee immediately proceed to clause-by-clause consideration of the bill, and the chair only be authorized to adjourn the meeting after clause-by-clause consideration of the bill is completed. So, in essence, this is a bill, just like the bill before the committee today, that should and never ought to be a partisan issue. And to reflect the nonpartisan aspect of this bill, one only needs to take a look at the history of the bill. The bill itself originated in the Senate, and it passed all three levels in the Senate, and it moved over to the House of Commons. And at second reading, it passed unanimously with every single member of the House of Commons agreeing to swift passage, in essence, getting it into the Justice Committee as soon as possible. 332 yeas, zero nays, and there were 8 paired members for a total of 332 members participating. Now, we all believe it's nonpartisan. We all believe that greater protections should be afforded to all healthcare workers and to frontline officers. We also have to reflect upon what we have known to believe long before the pandemic hit, but even more pronounced during the pandemic and following the pandemic, that there is a rising level of violence against our frontline workers. And this, Madam Chair, is extremely personal to me because my spouse is a frontline worker. She is a registered nurse. She's about to celebrate 30 years in her profession. And I remember vividly how many times during the pandemic that she would, because she was an essential service worker at that point, how often she was abused, ridiculed, sexist remarks being made to her, spat at on numerous occasions. And it's too many to actually count. But I could see on her face, I could tell by her demeanor that this wasn't the profession that she signed up for almost 30 years ago. So, like, where is this violence coming from? And some people thought it was maybe an origin and a byproduct of the pandemic and society essentially shutting down and the anger that people had during that time, and that anger has continued on following the ending of the pandemic. But what's more concerning, and I've got a lot of literature that I'm going to share with this committee right now, is that for every nurse, for every doctor, for every other healthcare professional or paramedic that actually has the courage to come forward and report this to their supervisor or to the administration of the workplace environment, or ultimately reporting this to the police, for every one of those individuals, there are dozens of individuals who basically just shut up and put up with this abuse. And in my view, Madam Chair, that is an absolute shame, because those who study to become a professional, those who wish to become part of the medical profession, those who want to take part in performing first responder duties, do that essentially as a call for service. And I have a call for service, my spouse has a call for service, we all have calls for service. But those who serve the public should never be expected to carry with them a license to be abused. That's certainly something that I wasn't taught as a parliamentarian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry to my colleague, Mr. Brock, for the interruption here. I was just hoping you could, or perhaps direct the clerk to just confirm the speaking list, just so we understand what to expect here.
Yes, absolutely. After Mr. Brock, we have you, Mr. Lawton, then Mr. Gill, and then Madame Lapointe, Ms. Begum, and then Ms. Gladue, and then Ms. Latanzio.
So I think I was talking about the license for abuse. And as parliamentarians, we all take harassment training. But we've all been subjected to irate constituents from time to time. I've dealt with numerous irate constituents from time to time, because I guess we all take the adage that although none of us, and no parliamentarian can ever say that they received 100% confidence in any general election from the electorate, we serve at the will of the electorate, and that represents people who voted for us, people who didn't vote for us. And for the nursing profession, the medical profession, and first responders, they too have that call to serve the public, to care for the public, to heal the public, to respond to emergencies and dangers in the public. But again, you know, in the past, and as a prosecutor, I hearken back to those occasions where I prosecuted assault and threatening behavior directed by the public towards healthcare professionals. And if there were a common theme back then, I would say the common theme was severe underlying either acute mental illness or an intoxication at some point where someone is not thinking as rationally perhaps as they should. But those cases that I prosecuted always had an underlying element that didn't completely excuse the behavior, but certainly helped put it into a focus as to why that person decided to act out when they do. So I guess the first thing I want to bring to the attention, and I took a recent meeting not too long ago, I believe it was last week, from the CEO of one of the healthcare systems in my riding, and that is the St. Joseph's Healthcare out of Hamilton.
For a second, Mr. Brock. I just want to pause for a second. I see the speakers list, so I'm just going to check with resources to see how long we can go today, and we would love to hear everything that you have to say. So just give us 30 seconds while we figure out what our resources look like, and we're happy to go for the end of the day today.
Avant qu'on adjourne, est-ce qu'il n'y aurait pas lieu de libérer les témoins?
Perhaps we should release the witnesses because clearly we're not going to hear anything anymore from them, and it's a bit unfortunate to just leave Ms. Ali sitting here.
With you guys and with the witnesses, I think it's better for us to keep the witnesses here. I'm hoping that this matter will be resolved very soon, but we just need to make sure that that our backup is on point as well. So if it's okay with you, Monsieur Fortin, I'll ask the witnesses to stay. Thank you. Thanks very much. Mr. Brock? Yes. So as we continue to figure out, I haven't suspended the meeting. Okay, no, I was just saying that if you wanted to continue speaking, you can go ahead and do that now while we're figuring out. Well, the clerk is figuring that out, so please continue.
I misunderstood you. All right, so I was about to read out some articles, and the first one is a letter that was jointly signed by the Canadian Nurses Association as well as the Canadian Medical Association, and it reads that the reprehensible assault of health workers in Halifax last week, this is an article from February of 2025, is a harsh reminder of the dangers health professionals across Canada face while trying to provide quality care to patients. And in that particular case in Halifax, this is a report from the Halifax Police Service dated January 30th, 2025. Halifax Regional Police have charged a man in relation to a stabbing that occurred yesterday at the Queen Elizabeth II in Halifax. I take that that's a hospital or a medical setting. At approximately 1 p.m., officers responded to a report of a man with a knife at the hospital. A man who was receiving care at the hospital stabbed 2 people in the emergency room and injured 2 others by throwing objects at them. 1 victim sustained significant injuries. At approximately 1:10 p.m., officers located and arrested the man on scene without further incident. They identified the name of the accused. He was charged with 1 count of attempted murder, 3 counts with assault with a weapon, 3 counts of aggravated assault, and 2 counts of possession of a weapon for dangerous purpose. The letter further reads, "This latest example may be an extreme case, but the sad reality is that doctors, nurses, and other health workers are subject to verbal and physical abuse on a daily basis. The results from the Canadian Medical Association 2021 National Physician Health Survey found that 8 in 10 physicians have experienced intimidation, bullying, harassment, and/or microaggressions in the workplace at some point in their careers. 4 in 10 reported that these experiences happen frequently or often, with women significantly more likely to say they happen at least once a week. A recent national review of workplace violence reports highlighted that incidents against nurses have become more severe and frequent in recent years, often resulting in physical and psychological harm. Legally, workplace violence is classified as both a health and safety issue and a criminal offense in Canada. In Alberta, reports of violent incidents in healthcare settings surged by 37% between 2019 and 2021. They also acknowledged that the toxic online behavior increasingly manifests in real life, with influential figures normalizing the use of threats and bullying. It is unsurprising that these behaviors are being echoed in healthcare settings. But hospitals, medical clinics, and other healthcare facilities simply can't tolerate this. People's health and lives are at stake. In 2021, the federal government responded to calls for help from the CMA, the Canadian Nurses Association, and the Canadian Federation of Nurses Unions, with legislation that made it illegal to use threats and bullying to stop a health worker from providing care to patients. That was, if my colleagues recall, C3 from the last Parliament. It also prohibits actions that would prevent a person from obtaining health services or accessing health facilities. We urge the public to respect these laws and call on public safety and law enforcement officials to continue their vigilance in enforcing them. Our thoughts are with the victims of the senseless assaults in Halifax and their families. Now, I referenced my healthcare system in Brantford. I met with the CEO and one of his staff members who literally echoed what I just read out in my earlier introductory remarks on this motion about the rising levels of violence and the underreporting. Specifically, they have given their full support for the immediate and swift passage of Bill S-233, an act, yes, I would agree with Mr. Lawton in his here commentary, an act to amend the criminal code, assault against persons who provide health services and first responders. They said workplace violence in healthcare is a serious and growing problem for organizations across Canada. At St. Joseph's Healthcare Hamilton, an academic health sciences centre, 4 healthcare workers are assaulted on the job every day. This healthcare system, Madam Chair, consists of facilities in Hamilton, also in Brantford. In fact, I was born at the St. Joseph's Hospital. It still stands to this day. In recent years, racial and sexual assault are among the fastest rising forms of violence. Unlike other workplaces, healthcare providers can't refuse service. Now, that's important because how often have we in our daily lives gone to either a public establishment or a private establishment, even going through the drive-through, whether that be for fast food or Tim Hortons or Starbucks, you inevitably are faced with a warning that harassment and verbal abuse will not be tolerated, will not be accepted, and will constitute grounds for non-service. And that's appropriate because it's not just healthcare and it's not just frontline workers who are experiencing rising levels of violence.
Mr. Brock, may I make a suggestion, respectfully, if that's okay?
Yes.
Look, we have witnesses here. We're doing clause by clause for Bill C-238. Your motion is very much registered in our committee, and I'm hopeful that perhaps let's get through this bill before we start on the next one. We have to finish the first sandwich before we start the next sandwich. So perhaps if we can come to an agreement that we go through with the rest of our witness testimony and go through clause by clause on this bill, and then pick up the debate, and we can sit for as long as you want to debate this.
Well, I thank you for your kind suggestion. Respectfully, I am not going to follow that suggestion because I anticipated that I might receive some commentary and instruction from the chair. So I took it upon myself as vice chair to reach out to the parliamentary secretary last Wednesday and offered what I thought to be an entirely reasonable proposal that would have highlighted and debated the importance of C-238 and S-233.
Point of order.
Proposal.
I recognize the point of order.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we're going to be getting into the exchanges between myself and the Vice Chair of the committee, I'd be more than happy to indulge in the last conversations we had via text. And I'd be more than happy to share them with the committee, whereby I indicated that I was more than happy and open to be able to discussing how we would be able to proceed, because the last text that was sent out was, I think, as of last Friday, whereby I kept the door open to be able to try to iron out the creases that we are now dealing with today at committee. And I find it very unfortunate that we knew that we were going to proceed with this P&B. We made it crystal clear, as a matter of fact. And here we are in tactics of filibustering. It is quite obvious to everybody. So if we're going to be going that way, then I think it's important that members around this table acknowledge and be made aware of that the door was always open, but we were crystal clear that we were going to proceed on this particular P&B, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Lawton.
To point it out for the record, we had previously scheduled clause by clause for C-238, and that was subsequently changed by the chair. Now, your hands are clean on this given the timing in which you've come over, but our intention had been to finish this last week. So I think it needs to be stated for the record that there was a needless delay that was put in the way these meetings were scheduled that led to us having this matter on the agenda today when we had an agreement, a good faith agreement across party lines to have S-233 on the agenda for today.
I completely understand that, Mr. Lawton, and as you know, I wasn't part of the scheduling piece. However, we have witnesses here. We have a bill before us. Can we, if possible, just get it done? And we're more than happy to debate the next bill that is before us also. So I leave it to members if you want to continue with your articles and talking about your motion. That's absolutely fine. But I would prefer to save the time for our witnesses and move the agenda forward. Go ahead, Mr. Brock.
May I suggest, if there is a willingness on behalf of the parliamentary secretary and the government to accommodate a discussion on S-233, I am more than happy to agree to a brief suspension to engage in those discussions. I'm mindful of the fact that you have asked for additional resources. I'm hoping that additional resources are made available. But the fact is, and the sad reality is, today is our final meeting for this session. So I will take the opportunity from the parliamentary secretary to read out my exchange with her, because it certainly was not on a with prejudice or without prejudice basis. And this is the proposal I put to her. So this was last Wednesday at 3:30. So here's my proposal. We move expeditiously today and clause by clause in the first 30 minutes of Monday's meeting, that being today, June 15th. And then move
Mr.
immediately.
Brock, my sincerest apologies. You know what? I think you guys have had ample time to discuss negotiations with each other, and if this is the path that you'd like to take, please go ahead and continue. I do. Go ahead, please.
And then move immediately to S-233 with Todd Doherty taking one round of questions, and we move immediately to clause by clause. All of this completed within 2 hours. We cancel Wednesday's meeting. Her response, let's see how today goes, and we'll talk after. No discussion.
Madame la Présidente, point d'ordre.
Point of order. Chair, I don't have any objections to what our colleague, Mr. Brock is saying, but could we have this in writing? Because we're talking about email or text message exchanges, which are documents, and documents should be produced in the two official languages before the committee.
Madam.
Thank you, Monsieur Fortin. My understanding is that this motion that Mr. Brock is discussing has been sent to your email a couple of weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Oui, je l'ai. C'est pas de la motion.
Yes, I'm not talking about the motion. I'm talking about the exchange of emails or text messages.
Consent and have this exchange of text messages translated into both official languages and made available to my colleague.
Madame Latanzio, on the same point of order.
Yep, no, I just, the motion, but he wanted, Mr. Fortin was requesting with regards to the exchange of text messages between myself and Mr. Brock, and may I seize the opportunity to, he can read out whatever was the exchanges, but I think it's worth noting that the last exchange with Mr. Brock, and I will take the liberty of reading it out into the record, after I have reiterated and made it clear that this is where we were going to go today. I made it crystal clear that the PMB of Madame Lapointe was going to follow the same procedure that we had with the other two previous CPC PMBs, to which the last exchange with Mr. Brock was, with one meeting remaining, discussions are moot. So I'm glad to hear that there's a change of heart that now he wants to discuss in the middle of a meeting, but my door is always open. But I have no issue with regards to the exchanges being shared with the other members. Absolutely none.
Thank you very much for that, Ms. Latanzio. Monsieur Fortin, Monsieur Brock, Ms. Latanzio, to all the members, figure your stuff out offline. Let's continue the meeting as Mr. Brock has brought to this. So please go ahead. Yes, Mr. Lawton?
So Mr. Brock had sought unanimous consent on tabling the exchange, and I believe...
My understanding is Mr. Brock said that he could request unanimous consent. I don't think...
He sought it, and it sounds like Ms. Latanzio agreed.
For unanimous consent, Madam
All
Chair.
right, members, do we have unanimous consent on this?
Oui.
And as I had suggested to members, it's better for you guys to talk to each other and collaborate so that we can move this forward as soon as possible. As I had said, I would really like for us to move forward on Bill C-238 and make sure that it gets to the House before we rise. But if members are not wanting to go that route, then I leave it to you. So Mr. Brock has the floor. Please
Madame la
continue,
Présidente, point d'ordre.
Yes, Monsieur Fortin, on your point of order.
La question du document que lit Monsieur Brock à l'instant, je suis moi-même vice-président de ce comité.
I'm also a vice chair of this committee. Yeah, no, there is interpretation. Yeah, can you hear interpretation? Yes. The question I was raising is that I myself am a vice chair of this committee. I did not participate in the exchanges, and I wasn't invited to participate in them either. And so if agreements that were concluded between the two vice chairs and the parliamentary secretary are read out, since I'm implicated in some way, I should also know what's in the exchanges.
Thank you, Monsieur Fortin. My understanding is that Ms. Latanzio did just read out the messages that were exchanged between the two.
Point of order.
I would really like to move on to your...
Point of order.
Go ahead, sir.
I was in the middle of reading out every text exchange, and then I was hit with several points of order. I disagree with your characterization of the parliamentary secretary summary of the text messages. I want, for the benefit of Mr. Fortin, and I will slow it down so that he can hear it through his native tongue in French, the full exchange between myself and the parliamentary secretary. Given the fact that I asked for unanimous consent to accommodate our bloc colleague that was refused by the government, I am prepared to repeat the text exchanges between myself and the PS very slowly so that Mr. Fortin is not prejudiced.
Point of order.
Go ahead, Ms. Gladue.
Chair, this back and forth is a complete waste of the committee's time. If the Conservatives want to continue to filibuster, let them do that. But I think it's just not appropriate for people to be in the sharing the text and translating people's personal text. So I don't give my consent to that.
Okay. Mr. Brock, you have the floor. Please go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ms. Begum.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm confused as to what MP Brock's point here is, because what started off with a very beautiful recognition of healthcare workers, and congratulations to your wife for 30 years of service, of care to so many loved ones across your community. And I just want to take a moment to say, we are so proud of our healthcare workers, nurses, doctors, PSWs, every single person who support and take care of our loved ones in their most vulnerable time, in their worst situations. And it is so important that we recognize that. And I was really impressed when Mr. Brock started to talk about that, because it recognized the importance of the work that we're doing. And I think it's really important that we focus on that. And right now we're debating C-238, which also focuses on something equally important, a little bit different, on restitution. And we have witnesses here. And I just wanted to say, I'm just really disappointed.
On your points of order, please give leverage to all of your colleagues.
So I'll just take 30 seconds,
I would like to see what point she's going to make. Calm down, guys. Let's go.
I just wanted to say that we are parliamentarians here. We should not be reading out text messages that we have sent to each other. And if the vice chairs want to understand the conversation with the parliamentary secretary, they should do that offline. And as someone who is here to serve her community, I do not find that appropriate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Begum. Mr. Lawton, you had that point of order. What I would really appreciate, if we can get back to Mr. Brock, he moved UC, it was not granted, and I would like for him to get back to his motion. Go ahead, very briefly, Mr. Lawton.
Well, mine's a genuine point of order. It was just that Ms. Begum was debating the merits of the motion, and it sounds like, given her insistence on the importance of what Mr. Brock is saying, that she'll be supporting the motion.
And then I think we should get back to Mr. Brock. Please go ahead, sir.
Yep. So for the benefit of our colleague, Monsieur Fortin, this is the exchange. So here's my proposal. You already read that. I'm doing it slowly. We move expeditiously today and clause by clause in the first 30 minutes of Monday's meeting, and then move immediately to S-233 with Todd Doherty taking one round of questions, and we move immediately to clause by clause. All of this completed within 2 hours. We cancel Wednesday's meeting. Ms. Latanzio's response. Let's see how today goes, and we'll talk after. Then I respond, will your team agree to wrap up by 6? Parliamentary Secretary responds, Vivian has amendments to present, so we cannot be done by 6. My response, it's her bill. Why wasn't it included to begin with? And how is she presenting as a witness? Ms. Latanzio's response, she can move amendments to her bill. Your colleague Luke did the same thing a few weeks ago. That was Wednesday. Thursday at 2:44, literally within minutes of every Justice Committee member receiving the notice of motion for today's date, with no reference at all to Todd Doherty's S-233, I respond. I guess the utility of a discussion is moot, given the notice of meeting for Monday. Same day, I get a response from Ms. Latanzio. Discussion is always possible. We are just following what I've told you in the past, as we did with the other two PMBs. 2 meetings each, one with proponent of bill plus officials, the second meeting with witnesses plus C times C, clause by clause. My response last Thursday, with 1 meeting remaining, discussions are moot. And that concludes. Thank you for filling in the blanks, Ms. Latanzio.
All right.
So, I'm going
moving
back to
on,
my
Mr.
motion.
Brock, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going back to my motion. And again, it just underlines and reinforces how we as parliamentarians can walk and chew gum at the same time. There was every ability, every single ability for us to conduct ourselves in a fashion to move quickly last Wednesday and quickly today. We're talking only about a handful of amendments, and we could have expeditiously moved with Todd Doherty's presentation. Probably wouldn't even need 1 full hour. We probably could have got by with 1 round and then move to clause by clause. I appreciate Ms. Begum's intervention, highlighting the importance of not only Todd Doherty's bill, but certainly the importance of Ms. Lapointe's bill. The fact of the matter is, without any agreement, without any understanding, without any telegraph of a willingness of the government to accommodate S233, they would rather punt that particular bill into the fall session. We'll have to deal with this in the fall session. But this was moved very quickly, as I said at the outset, at the Senate in the fall. It moved very quickly, unanimously at second reading in the House. There is absolutely no rational explanation offered by the government
Mr. Brock,
why this.
If
I'm still talking.
I understand, and if I may, can we bring it to the actual substance of the motion that you have moved, please?
I'm not doing that, Madam Chair. Thank you. So that's where we find ourselves in. A bit of a loggerhead, I might say. All right, so I talked about the position of the CNA. I talked about the position of the CMA, referenced the case in Halifax, circled back to my own riding, circled back to my wife's commentary and what she was subjected to. I'm now returning to some other publications that I was able to research. And this is titled, Workplace Violence Against Nurses in Canada, a Legal Analysis. Workplace violence against nurses is a significant global occupational health problem. Not just Canada, not just North America. This is happening around the world. Widely acknowledged in the academic and policy literature. Nurses experience intimidation, threats, and violence far too often in the course of their employment. A recent survey by 4 international health organizations found that violence against healthcare workers has been occurring at a higher frequency since the COVID-19 pandemic began in 2020, and that it happens all over the world. Workplace violence is a major concern for nurses in Canada and has received increasing attention from Canadian nursing organizations and government stakeholders. That would be the British Columbia Nurses Union, the Canadian Federation of Nurses Union, the CNA, the Canadian Nurses Association, the Government of Canada in 2021, and the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario, also known as RNAO. The full extent of workplace violence against nurses in Canada is difficult to determine due to pervasive underreporting, the lack of a consistent definition of workplace violence across studies and policy documents, and a lack of recent comprehensive Canadian data on the issue. Although now over a decade and a half old, the most recent comprehensive examination of the Canadian nursing workforce took place in 2005. That data revealed that almost 30% of nurses providing direct care reported having been physically assaulted at work within the past year, and 44% reported emotional abuse from a patient. According to StatsCan in 2006, that's data from StatsCan, sorry. A national survey of nurses found in 2017 that 61% of nurses had experienced workplace violence over the previous month, and 2/3 of those had considered leaving their jobs due to the experience. We already have a shortage of healthcare workers. Let not Canada be forever known as the outlier who fails to pass the appropriate legislation and then seeing even a further drain of our healthcare professionals because the Government of Canada is not doing enough. A 2019 survey by the CFNU found that 93% of nurses reported physical assault as the most frequent type of psychologically traumatic event exposure, with 46% of surveyed nurses reporting exposure to physical assault 11 or more times. Workplace violence against nurses can have serious consequences both for individual nurses and for the healthcare system. The experience of workplace violence may result in physical injury and psychological consequences for an individual nurse, and may result in short or long-term absences from work. The results of the 2019 National Survey of Nurses on Occupational Stress found that workplace violence can have serious impacts on nurses' mental health, including post-traumatic stress, major depressive incidents, generalized anxiety, panic, and alcohol use disorders with the potential for suicidal ideation and attempt. They compiled a list of cases. Now, this was, mind you, this was before the passage of C3, which provided as an aggravating factor assaults against healthcare workers to be an aggravating factor. But they compiled the 12 most leading cases at that time. They do not provide the area of jurisdiction. They don't provide the court of jurisdiction, and they certainly do not provide the province. But I wish to read out a few of these cases. Regina versus Gelendzowski from 2006. That offender pled guilty to assault. He was seeking medical attention following an assault on a police officer. He was restrained and spit on the nurse caring for him after telling healthcare staff that they were positive for Hep C. What was the victim on that particular nurse? The nurse reported feeling traumatized and was in fear of having contracted Hep C for a year before being confirmed negative for the virus. The nurse reported that the incident interfered with their ability to do their work as a nurse. On the column heading sentencing decision, the offender's last conviction was in 1990 and he was remorseful. The offender was sentenced to 90 days in prison for the assault on the nurse. Discussion of the victim being a nurse on sentencing, no discussion, but the judge did consider the pervasiveness of violence against healthcare workers by placing emphasis on the sentencing objective of denunciation. Police and healthcare workers are on the front lines. The message that the law will not tolerate the type of behavior that the offender has demonstrated must be sent. Moving on to 2009, the decision of Regina versus Knight. Knight was found guilty after trial for publishing defamatory libel. He sent a letter to the Medical Ethics Committee falsely accusing a nurse, which happened to be his ex-spouse, of allegations including drug trafficking. The impact on that nurse. The nurse reported being angered by the false allegation. Under sentencing, Knight had a long criminal record, and it was not his first offense against this victim. He was sentenced to a 15-month house arrest sentence to be served in the community. The Court of Appeal changed the sentence to be served in jail, finding Knight posed a danger to the community. Discussion of the victim on sentencing. No discussion. The judge remarked, however, the innocent victim is entitled to pursue her life and her profession in peace, free from false accusations that require her to defend herself and her reputation. A little more recent, 2016, Regina versus Stard. Stard pled guilty to assault causing bodily harm. He was seeking health care and became uncooperative. When the triage nurse turned away, Stard repeatedly punched the nurse without warning or provocation. The nurse suffered a concussion, torn retina, and bleeding in the eye socket. The nurse suffered PTSD and experienced difficulty with memory, balance, and focusing. The victim's personality had become unpredictable and often angry. The nurse was unable to return to work. Sentencing decision. Stard had no criminal record and was apologetic. He received a conditional discharge, meaning he did not have a conviction entered against him or served time in prison, which, in my view, as a former prosecutor, that is deplorable, that a judge under that extreme level of violence would deem that to be in the public interest. Discussion of victim being a nurse on sentencing. The victim's status as a nurse was not found to be aggravating. The judge commented, people that provide service to the public, and this would include taxi drivers, bus drivers, nurses, doctors, are in a position where they should be free from attack while doing their job. 2018, the decision of Regina versus Delory. Delory was found guilty after trial for assault with a weapon. He threw a cup of urine at a nurse, and I often hear about urine throwing and feces on a fairly regular and consistent basis every time that I take a stakeholder meeting with that profession. Impact on the nurse, no information was provided regarding the impacts on the nurse. Delory was already serving a life sentence in a federal prison at the time of the assault and was sentenced to a further 12 months in prison, served concurrently with his ongoing sentence. Regina versus Martin. It was a Court of Appeal decision in 2018, varying the trial decision of 2017. Martin pled guilty to assault. He was a certified involuntary patient at a psychiatric hospital and was assaulting a nurse student when a nurse intervened. He grabbed the nurse by the face and hair, shaking and scratching the nurse's face. Again, no victim impact statement done by the nurse. Sentencing. Martin struggled with mental illness and had a significant criminal record. She was sentenced to 45 days in jail for the assault on the nurse. The Court of Appeal varied the assault sentence to run consecutively to Martin's robbery sentence. Any discussion about the victim being a nurse? The victim's status as a nurse was not considered an aggravating factor. The trial judge made the general remark.
Excuse me, Mr. Brock.
Yeah.
I'm just going to have to pause. I see that bells are ringing in the House, so I seek unanimous consent to continue this meeting.
No.
Okay. In that case, I will say thank you very much to our witnesses for your testimony today and for your participation in Bill C-238. We really appreciate the amazing work that you're doing, and we'll hope to continue our conversation soon. Meeting is adjourned.